Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2022 film Resurrection. It's a Shudder exclusive and it's coming to Shudder on Thursday, October 28th. So this is a no spoiler review, although I will talk a little bit about kind of like thematic things at the end of the film or at the end of the review. So if you really don't want that, I'll kind of let you know before that happens. But no events of the film. I'm not going to really say any events other than a very little synopsis, which is like a sentence or two basically. So this one was written and directed by Andrew Semans, who also wrote a film called Nancy Please, which I have not seen. It stars Rebecca Hall, who is phenomenal, by the way. Her acting chops are wonderful. I loved her in The Night House, which I have a review for on my channel, also no spoilers. And she was, I was going to say just as good in this. I think actually even better in this. She is a phenomenal actress. She is one to really watch, because she is killing it, doing a great job. Again, Shudder exclusive coming Thursday, October 28th. Quick synopsis. It's about a woman who has had some trauma in her past involving a man. He starts to kind of show back up in her life unexpectedly, and things start to kind of devolve from there, and that's basically all I'm going to say. She also has a daughter, so there's an aspect of her being very protective about the daughter and concerned about the daughter and everything like that. And that definitely comes into play. But that's as much as I'm going to say about this film. I'm going to leave it there. Don't want to ruin anything about it because I do think it's a good film. It's not a perfect film. For the first like half to 3/4 of the film, I was thinking my rating was going to be like crazy high because it was going really well. It does kind of taper off, unfortunately. Not because of the performances, because like I said, Rebecca Hall, amazing. Everyone did well. Tim Roth is in this. I haven't seen him in a while. It was great to see him. But everyone did really well acting-wise. And it looks good. It looks really good. Cinematography is very nice. Directing is very nice. It's lit quite well. There are a few darker scenes, and they're lit extremely well. The music is really good. And once again, it's a restrained score. I love restrained scores once it don't scream at you at times of like intensity and dread. So a lot of good stuff going on with this film. Just a few things I wasn't big on, and that kind of brought my rating down a little bit. But let's talk about it. The opening scene really made me ask, where is this film going? It's a very interesting way to open a film that really just sends your mind kind of spinning. Like, what are we getting into here? Obviously, you see as the film goes on, it's a ride. The movie is 2 hours and 40-some minutes, so I think it's like 2 hours and 44 minutes, somewhere in there. But a little too long, in my opinion. But, being a person who doesn't like slow pacing, I was actually pretty good with this slow pacing. The only time where it starts to become a bit of a problem is, like I was saying, towards the end of the film, where it felt like the story was kind of like falling apart a little bit for me personally. There's one element to it in particular. I'll talk about it in a minute, but not spoil it, obviously. There's an element that just, I don't understand why it's in the film. It's a little too weird, but I'll talk about it. It immediately looks extremely well shot. Like I said, cinematography, directing, excellent. The mother-daughter relationship in this reminds me a lot of the one between the father and daughter in a film that I love that's on Shudder right now, Dogs Don't Wear Pants. Very similar. There was even a scene that was very similar in a same setting that I was just like, wow, this feels a lot like this interaction in Dogs Don't Wear Pants. But that's a good thing because that relationship between the mother and daughter feels very real. And that's one of the big things in general with this film is the character interactions feel very real. The characters have depth to them. The way they interact dialogue-wise sounds legitimate. Like, people would actually say this stuff. There are a lot of times in film where dialogue feels a little, too stuffy. It's a little too stilted. It doesn't feel realistic. But there's great flow to it. And I think it's the characters, how they interact, and how the dialogue is written that really does help with the slower pacing because you're enjoying taking in what's going on the screen, even though it's at a slower rate. Pacing becomes a problem when there isn't a whole lot going on or what's in front of you isn't constructed all that well. With this film, it is constructed quite well, so you're kind of like, yeah, it's going slow, but I'm enjoying kind of like languishing in the atmosphere that's been created. And to that point, the atmosphere that's created is quite good. It builds a certain level of tension pretty early on in the film, and it just maintains. They just keep it going, which I feel is a very hard thing for a film to get going. First of all, it's hard to like do a good job of setting it, like an intense tone and atmosphere to a film, but then to maintain it for as long as they did. Sure, there are a few like minor dips here and there, but you know, you're going to get that, and I think it was pretty impressive in that sense. They do a good job of making you feel like certain situations are closing in on you. Now, what I mean by that is a character will be in a certain situation, and because of the acting itself, the music they're using, and how they use the camera work, you start to feel a bit claustrophobic. It's like the walls within the scene are starting to close in on you. And that's because it's mirroring what's going on with a character. And that's brilliant. It's wonderfully done because that's what you want to do to the audience. You want to put the audience in the mind of these characters so they can feel it more, so they have a more visceral reaction to really what's going on. And it's more emotional for that reason too. So I was very impressed with that aspect of it. They do a good job of... I literally just read that. My apologies. It's been a day. You do get a bit confused because the perspective does become in question a bit. It is one of those films where you're kind of like, okay, this is a perspective we're seeing the film from, or the story from, and at a certain point, it's not 100% anymore in your mind. You're kind of like, okay, now I'm starting to like question things a little bit. Like, is this perspective 100%? Is this like a 50%? We should be trusting it. Like, what's really going on? And that's great because it throws things up in the air so that the audience can't be like, oh, I'm kind of bored with this. I know exactly where it's going. You don't fully know where this is going. So that's the good thing. You can make some guesses as to where it's going, but you don't know exactly how it's going to get there. The main character eventually gives you her full backstory that helps you understand her situation. It's very impactful. It's told extremely effectively, and the response another character has says a lot about a point within this film. I'm going to leave it at that. You will feel a very certain way, like I did, about the reaction from the character when this main character just, like, lays things very bare. And, like, as an audience member, you're very wrapped up in it, and you're like, oh my goodness. And the reaction from the other character, you're kind of like... So it may seem weird, but I think it was a very intentional choice. It's trying to say something. So just think about that. There's a story element in this that's just too weird and over the top, and it kind of distracts from everything else going on in the film. It is a part of the story, and it does carry throughout, but it doesn't seem that important until actually the end. Like, there is an element of it, you know, showing back up in the end in a story-related way, but it's too weird, it's too ridiculous, it's too over the top. And for me, it really distracts from all the great stuff going on in the film. That's one of the things that brings this film down for me. They could have achieved what they were trying to achieve with this thing in a much different way and had it feel more natural within the film. Because it also kind of takes you out of the realism within the film as well. Because the world that's created and the relationships and the people and everything feel very real. And then they introduce this thing and you're kind of like, well, that just seems like it doesn't fit. Like, it's a little ridiculous. It's too much. You'll see what I'm talking about if you see the film. And you should see the film. There's a moment late in the film where the audio actually gets blown out a bit, which I was really surprised by because everything technically was really great with this film. It's a very short thing, and it has to do with a moment with Tim Roth's character. It's very short. It's just like a few seconds where it happens, and the audio literally gets blown out. And so it really kind of took me out of the film for a minute because everything was so smooth up until that point. But thankfully, they don't have that issue again. It's just a momentary problem. The ending for me was okay. It could have been a lot better, in my opinion, if they didn't have that weird, ridiculous thing I'm talking about. It would have had a lot more impact. I think that detracts a lot. Now, there is a point to it if you really think about that ridiculous thing, but it just still feels like from a story perspective, it doesn't fit. It just should not be there. But, you know, some people probably really love that, and that's awesome. Like, I'm happy for you with that. So you'll probably like the film even more than me. It's just for me, it didn't really work. Again, the pacing is slow, but I was fine with it because the atmosphere that's created and maintained. Until the end. In the end, it started to bother me a little bit, but for the most part, pretty good. This highlights, excuse me, this isn't like the stuff that you would need to turn off for if you don't want any thematic spoilers. This film highlights communication issues between parents and kids due to kind of generational issues. That's not a main point. That's not like any, you know, big theme within the film, but it's something that definitely comes to the forefront, which is a very real thing in society, I think. Now, if you don't want any of like the thematic stuff, which, you know, I'll be relatively cryptic about at times, you can stop the review. But the film plays heavily on fears of losing your child in a lot of ways. Not like a lot, but a few ways. That's something that's been mined a lot in horror films, and I think they do a really good job with it. It's primarily about abuse systems, trauma, and the inability to get help from society. Excuse me, sorry about that. Getting a dry throat out of my water. I'm going to read it again just so it can sink in. It's primarily about abuse systems, trauma, and the inability to get help from society. So there you have it, my review for Resurrection. Out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'm giving it a very good 4-star rating. I do think this is a really good film. I think it's one that if you're trying to keep up with 2022 movies for horror, this is one you should definitely see. Let me know your thoughts once you've seen it. Go ahead and put it in the comments. You can do spoilers in the comments. That's totally fine. Do me a favor, though. Hit subscribe to my channel if you haven't. Also hit the notification bell button. I really do appreciate that. It's the best way to repay me if you like any of my videos. And yeah, it makes me very happy to see. I'm excited. I'm trying to grow this nerdy horror community here. And, you know, subscribing is like you're joining it. So I appreciate that. But anyway, regardless, thanks for taking your time to watch this particular video. And until next time, keep it brutal.